Christine Egnoski, welcome to the Undraped Artist Podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. It's great to have you. You are the executive director, is that right? Of the
Yes,
Portrait
that's right.
Society of America. I had to look at my notes again. The executive director of the Portrait Society of America. And so tell me a little bit about what that means. What do you do with the Portrait Society of America?
Sure, sure. Well, I've been here since the founding. The organization was formed in February of 1998. And actually, it was founded by three artists, and they had got together. My late husband, Ed Jonas, it was really his idea. Many years ago, when we first got married, we lived in a trailer out in the woods, and his studio was next door. And he talked a lot about how he could not find good education in realism and in the arts when he was in college. And frustrated by that, he always had this kernel of an idea that for an organization that would be run by artist for artist and would be that bridge between practicing artists and aspiring artists to share techniques, methods, knowledge, just information you could really get at a school, similar to the Hine Academy, where people can go and learn and exchange ideas and in the realist fashion. And that was not available. There was a lot of abstract schools at the time, a lot of art being created that was what I call installation art, found pieces that were installed. And so he's really frustrated by that. And so that was the first time I'd heard him talk about it when we first got married. And it was about 15 years later that he really gelled the idea and traveled to New York and asked some of the leading artists at the time, Ray Kinsler, Bert Silverman, Bill Draper, Dan Green, to come on board and advise them on how to go forward. And so after that was all formed, the board asked me to quit my job and come on board as the executive director. And that was 25 years ago. And we started with, of course, 0 members. That first year or the next year, we had a conference. We had 400 artists come. And we've just been building the society since then. And so from 0 programs, now we have 22 programs, 4 publications, and a variety of services. So that's how I came on board. And it's really been my life's work. I love it. Artists are really easy people to work for. And I really enjoy my role here.
Except I think you're being too kind because I know we're a pain in the butt to work for because I know
There
that
can be challenges.
none of us do anything on time. Is that right?
Well, that's true. That's true. I think it helped me being married to an artist for
Yeah.
37 years. I truly understood that the time is, it's a challenge.
Yeah, you guys are infinitely patient. So I used to think I was the only one who was a pain in the butt for you guys, and then other artists have been like, "Oh yeah, I never get anything on time to them. It's terrible. I'm so sorry."
You're in good company. You're in good company.
So, what were you doing before? What was your job before you quit and
Sure.
started doing this?
So my undergrad is in political science, and that's what I was doing. I was working for the Academy of Florida Trial Lawyers in their political action committee, and so we ran elections and campaigns, and really also worked for the association there. So I learned a lot of what I apply at the Portrait Society there
Hmm.
because it was an association. We did educational programs as well as political fundraising. So,
Wow, that was kind of serendipitous that he
a,
married
a
someone with
youth,
your skill set, right?
yeah, yeah, actually, and when Ed and I first got married, he was the head artist and designer for the Museum of Florida History. and he really wanted to go out on his own. And so we put a plan together. It took us 2 years for him to leave the state, and we put a plan together. How many portraits he would need to do a year, how to put a portfolio together, and how to go out there and get those commissions. So, yeah, it really was a partnership. And I think, I think most artists find that in life. If they don't have a gallery, they need an office manager or somebody in their life that can carry the business part while they do the creative side.
So are you really Ed's only agent? Did he never use galleries at all?
He did not. He didn't use agents or galleries. We put a business plan together and followed it. And it's interesting because Ed was always willing and excited to share his work with other people. So as long as he could get an appointment, he was usually able to get the commission. So in the beginning, of course, it's a little bit different now, I think, because of the internet, because we're talking 30 something years ago, but he put together a portfolio of his best work. We brainstormed about people that he knew in his life that might be interested in a portrait. And interesting story, he decided to approach the Secretary of State because the Museum of Florida History came underneath the Secretary of State. And his name was George Firestone. And his idea was he would just approach him and ask him to do his portrait. If he liked it, he could buy it. And if he didn't really like it, then he didn't have to buy it.
Really?
And it was one of his first, and it was one of his very first commissions. And I think it's one of his best paintings. I love the painting. And I think partly because he had a lot of freedom on what he wanted to do, because he just asked him and he said, yes, I would love to have a portrait done. And he's sitting in a chair with a vase next to him that he had collected on his travels. And it's really just a fantastic painting.
No kidding. Yeah, that's incredible. So you had this great job, which obviously paid off with what you did with the Portrait Society and what you did for Ed for all those years. But was it scary for you to leave something so secure and
it was totally scary. It was totally scary because Ed had gone out on his own he'd been out probably about 10 years. And so anytime I think you have two people, going out on their own, because really coming to the Portrait Society was like being self-employed because, it was, zero. It didn't exist before. And so building it from the ground up, it was really scary. Ed's career was pretty established, but as with Jeff, if you're not selling work or you don't have commissions, then you don't have an income unless you've been able to create some other kind of stream of income. Mm-hmm. And so, that part was really scary, and we worked really, really hard in the beginning. When Ed and Gordon first formed the Portrait Society. Ed's always been a really big idea man, but he's wasn't always an execution guy. And so he's like, I love coming up with the ideas, but I don't want to be the front man. And so, he asked Gordon Wetmore if he would do it, and he said he would, and he was perfect for the job. And so Gordon and I worked really closely together, and lots of hours in the very beginning. I came the first year and I worked for free. And that was just a commitment that Ed and I made. We thought that it would be successful. We thought there was a need out there, but you never know until you really start doing something, whether that's really going to work out. So the first year, the office was in Ed's studio, and I worked for free. And by the end of that first year, we had about 550 members. And the next year we had our first conference and we had 400 people attend. So
that's incredible.
We found out quickly we found it really quickly that there was a need for it.
And how did you get the word out? Because this was not really pre-internet, but it certainly wasn't a tool like we have now.
It was on the borderline of, it was, Marketing was a lot different back then. Print media was really the way to reach people. And so we advertised in American Artist Magazine, fabulous magazine. I was sad when it left
Yeah.
the industry, and that's really how we reached out. And we did a lot of mail too. But we did that initial ad, and then we collected addresses and names after that, and built a whole mailing list. And so we did a lot of mail. We actually had a brochure that we mailed. We ended up with a list of about 12,000 people, and we mailed brochures.
No
So a
kidding.
lot different. Yeah, a
And
lot different.
and you're spending money. You're not only not taking a paycheck, but you're spending money on ads and
Yeah,
mailings
yeah.
and so forth.
We really believed in it, Jeff. We really believed that artists, I often say it takes as long to become an artist as it does a doctor, because you can get the education, you can go into an art school for 4 years, but then you really need to come out and go to an atelier and be immersed, a little bit like a fellowship for a doctor. You get immersed into the area that you want to study in. And then it'd be very ideal then to work underneath an artist for another year. And so I think it's really an investment of time and education. And, it's obviously really good if you have some talent and skill, but if you apply yourself, I think you can learn to draw. And if you have the desire and a little bit of talent, and then you seek out the education. But really, the country went through a time between the 1950s and the 1970s where you could not find a traditional education at a university. It was all abstract, and really, if you wanted to be a realist artist, you were almost put down if you attended a school. And so, the need was there, I think, and I still think the need is there as far as bringing people together. And so I think the need was maybe education based, but as, what you found in an atelier, you must have the same experience that artists come to you and say, I haven't been able to find somebody that's going to teach me how to stretch a canvas, how to mix colors, how to understand value. They just were not teaching that. Even now, I think they just tell students to just go out and buy canvas.
Hmm.
But there's something valuable to learning about your materials, and to be able to stretch a canvas and prime it and understand how the paint applies to that. And
Hmm.
yeah, so I
Yeah.
think I think the need's a little bit different. I think you can find education now, but I think the community is what we hear is valuable to artists coming to the conference, as that community that's created.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing that I value most about the conference. I mean, as you know, I guess it's been like 10 years since you first invited me to be on the faculty. And
Uh-huh.
I look forward to April every year. I mean, it's so much fun to be part of it and to go see you guys, the staff, to see the artists that show up to be on the faculty. It's like this big art family.
It really is. It's like a bond, because it's interesting too. Because when we first started out, we hired a lot of interns from FSU to help us, and those people are still with us, Jeff. They've moved on. They've got their own careers, and they come back as our on-site staff. So you probably met Gina Cohen and Lauren
Mm-hmm.
Miller. They're our on-stage managers. They both, Lauren interned for Ed, and Gina worked for me and then interned with Ed. And they're still coming back. They just
Mm-hmm.
really believe in the mission of the Portrait Society, and they see what it does for artists. And so, they've gone on and they have their own professional lives, but they take a week off every year and they come back. We've got a core of about 15 people that, really help us, because we could never, there's only four of us here in the office. We could never put on an event like that without that kind of help.
Right. And so who is in the office full time?
So it's me, and then Kim Azarito, and she's been here 21 years, and she takes care of accounting and budget, and then conference, and then a couple other special programs. She does the signature series, And then everybody works on marketing together. That's a team effort. And then Amanda Oliver, she's been here 17 years, and she does all the membership and registration for the conference. And then Allison Gilliard has been here just about 4 years, and she takes care of the state ambassador programs, Cecilia Bow Forum, marketing, exhibitors. And so she's kind of like a special projects person. So, and we do have a part-time person, Carrie Mortimer, and she just comes in a few hours a week seasonally, and she takes care of the 6x9, that mystery art fundraiser that we do once a year.
So tell me a little bit about what it takes to put one of these conferences together. Because when I show up, it just runs like a fine clock, you know. I mean, everything just
I'm so glad you said that.
But I mean, I know you guys are just running like chickens with your heads cut off too, right?
Yeah,
But
yeah.
what does it
It is a
take?
lot of work. It takes us, it starts about 18 months out. I think sometimes when people come, they're like, "Oh, I could do this," because I've seen a couple organizations come and go, and they're like, "Yeah, they work out the numbers. Okay, if you have 500 people and they're all paying 500, it sounds like you're collecting a lot of money in tuition, but the effort and the expense really, it's a break-even proposition for us. But what it takes, it's about 18 months out. We start. We find a hotel, a property, we sign a contract, and you have to make a lot of guarantees to that hotel that you're going to book sleeping rooms and that you're going to have a certain amount at the dinner and make your food and beverage. So it's sort of like putting on a really, really large wedding once a year. It just has all the details of that kind of program.
A really, really large wedding.
Yes, a really large wedding. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's funny too, because through the years we've grown, we've added programs to it. And so when you really look at the weekend, there's a lot of moving parts, like you said. They're just, it takes a lot of behind the scenes. We have a really large document that we all work in, and that's where the details get put in on because you think about it, just asking the faculty to serve is the first step, but then you have to make sure that the rooms are set with the AV that you need and that the supplies you need, and that the next event that's coming can turn over in a timely manner. And so, and moving that many people through a whole day is a lot of on-site work. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about you mentioned Kim. She does, forgive me, I forgot what you called it. It's that kind of like mini Portrait Society conference. What do you call that you do? I did one in Oklahoma.
Yeah, the Portrait Academy. That was great. I love that.
Oh,
Oklahoma
no, you said
event.
something else. It was a different name that Kim does. She runs something.
She does now the signature status, which is a different
that's
group
the award thing.
Yes.
Right,
so
right,
that's the program we started 6 years ago. It may be longer than that. It may be 8 now. And where artists can apply for signature status with the Portrait Society. And so you have to fill out an application, submit your work, and there's certain requirements. You have had to teach in the field and then also been accepted into a competition, either internationally or nationally. So,
okay.
It's a really neat designation program.
Yeah, that really is. No, and I was mixed up. I thought that you were referring to the academy thing that you do, but tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, the Portrait Academy.
Yeah. Tell me.
So those are smaller meetings that we decided to try to host around the country. We usually do it at a museum. So for the one that you were involved in, we were at the Oklahoma Museum there, the Cowboy Museum, and it was a great space. They had classroom space for us and then that large demo space. And so we've been at the Hunter Museum of Art. We were in Nashville at Lipscomb University. So, and then we went to Miami and we did one at Vizcaya. And so it's an opportunity for people to come in a little bit smaller venue. We only have about 100 people. We limit it to 100 people. and then we paint or draw the next day too. And so it's a little bit of a hands-on as well as a first night. Now for your event, we did a tri-state competition, and that was really fun. That venue had exhibit space, and so we did a 3-state competition and exhibition, and then an awards. So I think you and Rose judged that. And so it was a mini version of the conference, but because it's much less people attending, you can really have a more intimate experience as an attendee. That's why we started them.
And how many of those do you do a year?
Well, we used to do 3 a year, and then the pandemic has sort of gotten us off our game of doing that. So we'll probably go back to doing those, but we try to do 3 in the fall.
Okay.
The last one we did online.
Okay. Are you guys still doing things online, or
we are. So we implemented. We've done 2 portrait academies online, I think, and 1 conference online. And so that was quite the learning curve for us. And so we had to really get some help in teaching us how to run that kind of, program. And then working with the faculty, getting them up to speed too, to make sure that they all had equipment that they needed to be able to do that too. So, I hope we do go back, because I think they were really beneficial programs.
Yeah. The audience should know just how unbelievably smooth this whole thing goes, and the amount of technology and equipment that just runs like clockwork.
Yeah, we have the same AV company that's been traveling us with us this whole time. And so they have their own setups. So they set up 9 feet. I think we're up to 10 feet by 20 feet screens on either side of the main stage. And that's a complicated thing with the lighting and the 2 cameras. So everybody has a really good seat in the room. So we've been really fortunate to be able to keep the same team and then have that same staff. I think that helps a lot, because everybody has institutional experience and knowledge about how we've been doing it and what works and doesn't work. So we always have a post-conference meeting. We're like, okay, well, that event didn't work. We're not doing that again. Or this went really well. We need to make sure that we repeat it in that way. So.
Yeah. Yeah. So tell me a little bit about some of the highlights that you've seen over the years in the conferences, some memorable things that have happened.
Okay, sure. So, what immediately comes to mind is some of the challenges in the background that nobody sees or knows about. But when we went to Dallas, about 3 weeks before we were getting ready to leave, the hotel called me and said, the room where you were booked, they had like 100-year flood there. And the room where you were booked has been flooded.
Oh, you gotta be kidding me.
I'm not. And so, we're all ready to go. We sent a truck from Florida wherever we're going with all of our things on it. And of course, the AV truck is a semi. And so it comes from another location. And so that was a challenging year for sure, because they were able to sort of fit us in some other areas of the hotel, but not like what we were used to with a dedicated room. We had to move things and walk a long ways in between. And then while we were there, actually one of our rooms flooded. And so, that was challenging. But, there's a couple of really big high points for me. One of them actually didn't happen at the conference. About 16 years ago, I think, we formed another committee within the Portrait Society called the Cecilia Beau Forum. And it was really focused on the women experience as an artist, and how, women have not been in the workforce that long. And when you look at art through the years, a lot of times people became artists and were nurtured as artists by mentors. And so they would enter a studio and mentor with that artist and be educated, but also helped in getting commissions through that artist, especially if it was a well-known artist, then they may hand commissions down. And, you know, women were not even allowed to go to art school in the past. And so we really wanted to address some of those issues and so we formed the Cecilia Bow Forum. Judy Carducci was the chair up until just a couple of years ago. And she's now retired. But so we formed 3 committees, and one was mentoring to really intentionally match people up. And then the other one was literature, which is still part of the journal. And it's just a dedicated 2 pages to profile a women artist that is either historical or contemporary. And then the third portion was an exhibit committee. And we wanted to have an exhibit of women artists because I don't know if you've seen the statistics, but collection of women artists in museums is like 3% of the art. 3% of the artists in museums are women artists. And so we wanted to just show there are women out there working and creating art. And so we hosted this exhibition called The Inspiring Figures. And it was at the Butler Museum. I think it's the Butler Museum of American Art, and it's in Youngstown, Ohio. And it was a 3-tiered exhibition, and we had a historical portion, and we borrowed work from different museums, and then a contemporary where we had an invitational. We invited 10 artists, and then there was a competition section. And so people submitted work. And just when I stepped in that day to the Butler Museum and all that work was hanging and showcased, and you could just see the level of skill and commitment. It was really, it's one of the most memorable parts of my tenure here. And of course, the very first time we had a conference, because I didn't really know what I was getting into, I can remember that, just that feeling of, we're here, the stage is set, the artists are all here, the attendees are all here, I really, we really did pull it off. So, and I'm still amazed every year, that opening night, that Thursday night where everybody's painting in the same room, where we started off and there was only 3 in the beginning, and now we have 18 artists in that big ballroom. And whenever we kick that off, I just feel really so proud that we're all together and people are so energized. And there's not anything like it. I don't know of anything like that in the country.
No, I don't think there is.
And so, yeah.
Yeah, that face-off is a blast. So for people who don't know what it is, like you mentioned, 18 artists are all drawing. We're grouped into 3 artists per model. And then there's an audience of 1,000 people or something that just wanders around.
We have 700 to 1,000 regularly.
Yeah, that just wanders around behind these groups of 18 artists and watches them paint. It's like workshop on steroids. I mean, 18 different professional artists painting all at the same time in one room. It's really a cool idea. Who came up with that?
So, that idea actually came from Ed, idea man.
Yeah.
And we tried it in Boston for the very first time, and we were in 3 separate rooms. And it worked really, really well. And so it grew into, it was just one artist and one model. And so it's grown into what it is today. And I love it. We've thought about changing programs, but we've never thought about changing that program. We've made some adjustments to it. We made sure that we added sculpture in there. And we always want to have drawing. We've had watercolor. We've had pastel. So we want to make sure that the mediums are covered too. And the variety of artists in there are very different too. So, and one thing's really fun too, Jeff, as you know, since you've done it, is when the artists come in the room, they draw a number and then they go to that number. So you don't get to pick the group that you're working in. That part's a surprise. And that came from Dawn Whitelaw. She does that at some of her workshops. and you just pick a number. So that's the model that you get and the spot you get.
Mm-hmm.
It can be a little intimidating. Do you find it intimidating at all?
Well, I don't know if intimidating is the right word, but I find it, no, I don't know what the right word is. Let's put it this way. I'm definitely hopeful when I get there that I draw a number with a model that I'm inspired by. You know, it's hit and miss. Sometimes I
Yes.
am, sometimes I'm not. And you just got to do, do with it what you can. But other than
Yeah,
that,
so
it's fine.
it's a mystery. Yeah, it's a mystery on the model and on the group because it's really fun if you get a group that you really can click with because then together you set up the model and then you're painting for the whole evening for 3 hours together.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. Well, I've never had a group that I didn't click with. That's it. Like I said, it always
oh,
just
that's
feels like
great.
a big family there. Everyone's kind of like-minded. We all have a similar attitude toward painting and drawing. So, yeah, I've
Yeah,
never had a
I
group I
think
didn't
that's
like.
really great. The other thing that is really good is we try to find hotels that we're the only group in there. We have had the experience. We went to Chicago and Boston, and we were at very large properties there, so we weren't just the only group in there. And it's the opportunity to create community when you get on the elevator, when you walk down the hall. Every person that you see is an artist. And artists create by themselves in their studio. So if you can get out and be, with people that love the same thing you do, and every person that you meet has that similar shared experience, it does create a bond.
Yeah. And you do another thing that I think really helps with this idea of a bond or at least a positive environment is every Sunday morning at the end of the conference, you do something what's called, is it inspirational hour?
Inspiration hour. Uh-huh.
Yeah. Tell us about that.
Sure. So, it really started originally. Gordon came up with that idea, and it was almost an opportunity for artists to get together that maybe worshiped on Sunday morning. And so, when we first started it had more of a religious basis, but it's kind of, we have an international population. And we felt, it was sort of a Christian base. And we felt like, we need to really acknowledge that there's a wide belief out there for all different cultures. And so we've moved it now into more artists telling their personal story about what inspires them in their life or something in particular that they want to talk about. I know Leslie Adams conducted it one year, and she talked about her the portrait that she did of her self portrait as a child writing on a blackboard, and it was part of an exhibit there in Ohio. And she actually brought the exhibit, and then she talked about it on Sunday morning. I know Greg Mortensen talked about he traveled to Haiti right after the hurricane about 12 years ago, and was helping rebuild, and then ended up meeting all these children that were in an orphanage, and he did a whole series of portraits of them. So it's been, I know you did one for us,
Hmm.
and so it's really a time for people to get together and hear a personal story about an artist, something that they've done either in their community or with their work.
How have guests responded to this over the years? What kind of feedback have you gotten?
You know, I think I just love artists because one thing, in addition to being able to, create really beautiful work, is they usually are very articulate about their experiences. So we've gotten some just wonderful letters through the years from people on what it's meant, and a lot of people credit their careers to us because of the connections that they've made at the society. I know you did a podcast with Michelle Dunaway,
Hmm.
and she has a wonderful story that when the very first time she came to the conference, she was in the International Portrait Competition. And Richard Schmid saw her painting there and contacted her, and they ended up, having a very close relationship and asked her to be part of the Putney Painters. And so it's been a great influence in her life. And she talks about that. And she made that connection by being in the competition. So, and I think that same year, Joseph Daly was in the competition. I don't know if you've ever seen his portrait, but he did a portrait of his then father-in-law, and he was in a kilt by the fireplace.
Mm-mm.
And that year, Minnie Churchill was our keynote speaker. And she runs the Winston Churchill Foundation, because Winston Churchill was an artist. He was pretty good artist. He was a watercolorist. And so she came and was our keynote speaker, and she saw Joseph's painting. And let me back up and share this with you, because I think this is a great story. So when Gordon called him to tell him he was a finalist, his mother answered the phone, and she said, "Oh, he's out painting." And he's like, "Oh, well, when he finishes painting and comes back in, would you have him call me? Is he at his studio?" And she said, "No, he paints houses for a living. He wants to be an artist, but he paints houses for a living." And so, Joseph called Gordon back. When he got back, he was delighted, brought that painting. It ended up winning, I believe it won Best of Show, because we used to have a category grand prize and then Best of Show. We've retooled those because it was a little bit confusing. But Winnie Churchill saw that painting and loved it, and she ended up commissioning him for like 21 paintings over the next 3 years. So he traveled from the United States to the UK many times over the next 3 years, and then he would do a painting for a family. That family would recommend him. And so really, he does credit the Portrait Society with starting his career, because he was a house painter just before he came to the conference.
You got to be kidding me. That's amazing.
Isn't that a great story?
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and that brings up another thought about the contest. One thing that I tell people all the time is that I've been to so many museums and galleries, and I can honestly say that I never see more incredible work or more work at such a high level in one room than I do when I see this contest every year. I mean, you go to museums and there's a gem and then not so much of a gem, and then a gem and then not so much. But you go to this contest and there's 25 master works every single year. Like the best of the best.
I know. I feel that way, Jeff. When I'm standing there, I was like, this is a museum show. This should be in a show for 6 weeks so everybody can see it.
Yeah.
And I have not been able to figure out that logistic. I've often thought it should be a show at the National Portrait Gallery, because you're right. It's like curated. It's like the best work being created, because it has to be a recent work. So, and I like that part because they all look contemporary in the room. If you just allowed work at any point in an artist's career, I think it could be dated in that room. And so we do have that rule. It has to be created in the last 3 years, and never won a prize. So you won't have seen it before, and it will be created recently. And then we go through a really rigorous judging process. And I've been asked a couple times about it. So if we have time, I'd love to tell you about it so people can really have a good understanding. I've often thought it would be great if we could record something so people could see it. But so everybody submits online, and it's anonymous. So you're assigned a number, and not a name, but a number. And then the first round, or the first series of rounds, are conducted by a 3-panel of jurors, and they look at every single work. And the first round, it has to have at least 2 yeses for it to come. Oh, I'm sorry. It only needs to have 1 yes for it to move through. So anybody can move it through. And so that, comes to the next round. So we probably start out with about maybe 2,500, and then we get down to about 1,700 with the just a 1 yes forward.
And these are
applicants. To another round.
These are applicants from all over the world.
Yeah, so all over the world. Yep.
Right.
And so then the subsequent rounds are 2 yeses have to move it forward. And so then we get down to about 200 when we get to that point. And then 3 yeses have to move it forward. And so usually we get to about maybe 55 then. And then from there we go, final in the room. And so that has to be unanimous too. It takes us about 3 days
Wow.
and of all day. And yes. And so it's quite, and so then those people are invited to bring their original work on display at the conference, and then it's judged from the originals, which we all know anytime you see an image visually on, digitally, it's not the same as when you get the opportunity to see it in person. And so a different panel of judges then judges on site. And that's a very specific process too. So we have 3 judges. They judge the room independently. They go through it with a clipboard and they select who they want to be grand prize, first place, second, third, fourth, and fifth, and then honorable mention. And then Kim and I tally those. We sign a number to them and we tally those and we go back and present it to the panel. And then there's some negotiation from there. If you have 2 people that really are close for the grand prize, then they go through a critique very similar to, I think you did a critique at the conference one time where people brought original work and we talked about it. Each juror goes up and says, this is what I find relevant and good about this painting. This is an area that I find problematic in this composition or this anatomy. And another juror may say, that doesn't really bother me. I think that enlarged hand is intentional. And so there's a lot of that until they finally settle on those placements. So that way one judge can't really, favor something and bring it all the way through. So I think it's a really good process. And I think it's very balanced because until we get to the conference, those jurors, they don't know who they are because you're assigned a number. Now, obviously, once you get there, they know the name. But I've been in there every single year, and they're diligent and conscientious, and they're very aware that they're judging a fellow artist's work. So they're really respectful and thoughtful and very conscientious. They take the duty very seriously.
And how do you choose these judges, the final ones that are artists?
Yeah, so we do it a little bit different each year. So we try to have a board member and an advisory board member and then another selected judge. And so we try to pick somebody that has a lot of experience. So like Bill Chambers is on the panel this year, and he is very involved in OPA, and he has judged a lot of shows for them. So we want a good combination of somebody that really top-notch artist, but also has experience being impartial and judging something. We don't want somebody to just come and be attracted to their own style and their own technique. We want them to be able to say, and we do give them a written description of what the Portrait Society is looking for as far as, proficiency within the medium, anatomy, composition. And then if they've met all of these criteria, have they also then gone forward and what, is the aesthetic sophisticated? Is the artist able to communicate some message that they're trying to say? So we do give a little pre-information about what we want the judges to look for.
So this year is kind of a special year for the contest.
It is. I was so hoping you'd ask me that question.
Can you tell us why?
So we took the prize money from $25,000 to $50,000. We wanted to do that in celebration of our 25th year. And, we're hoping that we can continue on, that we can find a donor, maybe rename the prize after that donor. And we're really, after Ed's death, Don Whitelaw actually was the interim chair for about a year. And then Michael Shane Neal was appointed chair after that. And he and I and the other board members have been working really hard to say, where's the Portrait Society now? And are we relevant? And what do we need to be doing in the next 10 years to serve portrait art? Are we, what's our role? And here's what we're doing now. And are all of those things, do we need to keep this thing and then maybe either adjust this or not have this program anymore, or add this program or deepen this program? So we're going through that now. We've had a couple of leadership meetings in Nashville, and out of one of those leadership meetings was the idea to raise the grand prize to $50,000. We really want it to be the premier competition for figurative and portrait art in the country, and internationally too. And I think raising that prize to that level really, spotlights that.
Well, it's motivating because I'll tell you
I
what,
love it. I
a
love
lot of
it.
artists are going to
Yeah,
paint
it's
for it this year.
significant. That's a
Yeah.
life changing in number. And so I remember when they first had the arts in the parks. Do you remember that?
I don't.
Richard Schmid won it 1 year, and I can't remember how many years it went on. I was sad to see it go, but so any painting that was done from a national park could be entered in the show, and the prize was $50,000.
Mm.
And it's not happening anymore that I know of. But it was really a talked about competition. And I hope the same thing will happen for the Portrait Society competition. I know that it's held in high esteem now, but we really just want to broaden our reach to people. And so
Yeah.
I'm hoping by doing that, we can.
Oh, I think you already have. Yeah, a lot of people are talking about it. I've definitely heard a lot of people talk about it. So that's
Oh,
great.
that's great.
Yeah. So tell me, that brings up another thought, and that is, money, unless you get a donor, money's coming out of your pocket. I mean, this is a nonprofit organization. You guys are cutting
Yes.
yourself a check, which I'm assuming you're not rolling in dough.
No,
So
no.
tell me a little bit about that. Why did you choose to go nonprofit versus profit? Because a lot of companies are popping up that are about education. I mean, nothing is quite like yours. Yours is unique, but they're for profit. And so
Right.
tell us a little bit about why you went the direction you went.
Sure. So I'll give you a little backstory. So when Ed first came up with the idea, we had not been married very long, and he really wanted to go out on his own. And so we sort of set the idea aside to, make that happen first. And he came back around about 10 years after that. And at the time, he had met Leon Lord, who had a portrait agency. And he told him about the idea, and he ended up starting, it was called the American Society of Portrait Artists, ASAPA. And Ed and Gordon and a number of other artists served on the board. They had a couple of events, but Ed's idea, the kernel of his idea was that it would be a nonprofit. And the reason why he wanted it to be a nonprofit was a number of reasons. One thing is that a lot of the artists, all the artists were donating their time. The board was donating their time, and the faculty was donating their time. And so if you're doing that, if you're not, able to share, what the tuition, on that kind of level, then you really want to have a nonprofit so that, long after anybody that's serving or contributing, it goes on, because if you're run by a board and no one is being self-inured by that, so no one's profiting from that, then you've created a structure that can go on beyond you. Then if you are an owner, a lot of times, if the owner decides they don't want to do that anymore, or that owner passes away, then that stops with that. And also,
But can't you just sell the company? I mean,
yeah, you could sell the company. You could, instead of just stopping it, you could sell it. But in my experience, what has happened by making it a nonprofit, the people that donated to it, because it's a charitable organization. The Portrait Society is formed as a 501c3. And so the donor is able to write that off as a tax deduction on their tax return. But then also the faculty are donating their services and the board is donating their services. So no board member gets paid. A lot of times when you serve on a bank board, it's a paid position. None of our board members get paid. And so all of the time, and so it's almost like people bring their best to me because it, I don't know if you've ever been like on a home building team for like, Ed and I used to go to Guatemala every year and you paid your own way. And we went there and built homes, drove up in the mountains and built homes for indigent people that didn't have a home. They just had like lean-tos. It's quite the experience. But it was almost like everybody was on a team because everybody was the same at the same level. Everybody had paid for their own way there. Everybody was donating their time, taking their time off of work. And it was like everybody's pulling in the same direction. I think when you have an owner and you're for profit, your focus is different. Your focus is the bottom line, not always the content. It's like, how can we increase our bottom line? And so for us, we don't make any money off the conference. We just break even. And now, it doesn't mean that we don't need funding because we have to do the fundraising part. That's true. But it's like everybody's pulling in the same direction. And the other component is the Portrait Society will go on because it's not connected to one person. And people will step up, and fill those positions as people retire. And then two, I think also that your mission is different. When you have a for-profit, a lot of times your mission is, you have to stay in business and you want to make money. But for a nonprofit, your mission is your public statement. And for us, that is to promote and further the traditions of fine art portraiture and figurative work. And so really, every program we come up with, it's like, does it meet your mission statement? And is the effort going to your mission? And for a for-profit, I think sometimes programs are created. This will make us a lot of money. Let's do this. Well, are you analyzing it on who benefits? And is the learning going to go on? And, are you going to help a person? Or are you just creating this because it's going to make you money?
Right. Right. I like that. So that brings up a thought that I've had for quite some time because I really value the Portrait Society and what you guys do. Have you thought much about, you can't do this forever.
Yeah,
You've probably got 40 years left.
I
You're still young, but what happens
yeah.
after?
Well, I'm 65, so, I am sort of thinking about retirement a little bit. But I think, Shane just has this real commitment to look at the next decade, to look at the next 10 years. And we're actually in the process of creating a fundraising arm that we could match maybe some art patrons with the Portrait Society. And we're really working hard on that. I'm really excited. It's going very well. We're not quite ready to unveil it. And then the other thing is, I do probably have a long range plan. So what I would do is, find an executive director in transition and probably overlap that person for a couple of years. And then I would love to stay on in some kind of part-time capacity for, another 3 to 5 to 6 years because, I love the Portrait Society and it means a lot to me. And I want to just make sure before I would fully retire that it would be really secure for the next, a decade. And one of those is, and Shane's really committed to this, and I believe in it too, is to establish an endowment. And I'm not going to go anywhere until that's established. And most nonprofits that have been around, like the Artist Fellowship, I think it's been around since like 1874. They have an endowment. The National Sculptural Society, they've been around for, I think, over 100 years. They have an endowment. And it just is a way to secure the future of the society. The other thing that we've done that's been really, really smart is we bought a building it's probably been about 8 years ago. And it's a home, and we renovated it, and we got it for a very reasonable price and renovated it into our office. And I think we only owe about $70,000 on it. And it's a little bit over 2,400 square feet. And it's just, it's another way to say that the Porch Society has, roots, and really, we have no debt. We've been very careful with our money. We've been very responsible with it. And so we have no debt, and we own the building. And so that's really solid footing. And then you add the endowment component in there and maybe matching up some patrons. And I think the future will be really, really good. And then we're also going to evaluate, we have 22 programs and publications. We're going to look at each one of those and make sure we're in the right posture that we need to be in.
Okay, so you keep mentioning Shane, but for those who don't know who you're talking about, it's Michael Shane Neal, who I also interviewed on the podcast. So tell me about
I saw that. It was great.
He was a great interview. Tell me about what his involvement is.
So he's the chair, and so there's an executive board, and that's made up of Dawn Whitelaw, she's the vice chair, Mary White, Wendy Caparel, and Kwang Ho. And so they're what I would call a working board. They're very involved, and we do most of those by Zoom and have an agenda. And so they would direct the activities probably and the programs of the Portrait Society. And then we have an advisory board, and so they would be more like a think tank. And so we might present to them a variety of ideas, and they would analyze those and say, what they'd like to keep and what they don't think is good. So it's really a two-part board that oversees the activities.
And how long has Kwang been on the board? I didn't know Kwang Ho was on the board.
He just joined the board.
Oh,
so he's been on about 7 months. He just joined.
Okay,
yep.
Well, that explains why I didn't know. Yeah.
And Wendy just joined too. So I'm happy to have both of them on.
Oh, yeah, that's a powerhouse.
Really great addition.
Powerhouse group right there.
Yeah,
that's great. So is there anything else that you'd like to talk about that relates to the Portrait Society?
Probably just, for your listeners that may not know a lot about it, we do have a website, and it has all the information of the different programs that we do. There's their homepage. So you can see we have 4 competitions that we host each year. We have a members only, the international, the self-portrait, and then the future generations. And that's a new competition that we just started. It's in its 3rd year, and it's for artists that are 18 to 24 years old. And I have some ideas on how to kind of propel that forward too. I'm real interested in spending some time brainstorming about how you get the word out. It's so important. And I know, Jeff, you have a lot of young people. I'm so impressed by what they're creating and their dedication. And so I really want that competition to be something that art teachers tell their students about, so that we can get a larger entry, and then just the word out. And I'd like to do a little bit of fundraising to up the prize, because it's difficult and challenging to be an art student.
Mm-hmm.
So and so that's the membership page. Just shows you how you can join. It's really reasonable. It's $75 a year, and that includes all of our publications and a discount to the conference. And then, so there's our competitions. The members only is really popular. The future generations is the one we just talked about. And then, of course, the international is our yearly, where the people actually bring the piece in person. So, yeah.
So with the future generations one, I wanted to bring up something that I admire about you guys. And well, first, let me go back to this here. Let's see if I could find that picture here. Okay, right here. I don't know if our viewers can see this, but in this photo, you'll notice that about 90%, if not 98% of the people in that picture are middle-aged women.
That's true.
Yeah, and
that's true. our membership is made up of, yeah, a good percentage
Yeah, and
is
which is
women.
great.
Yeah.
But here's my point though, and that I think there's correct me if I'm wrong, but there's that the demographic that can afford to take time off from work, go to a conference for 4 days, pay for a hotel room, pay for, even though your conference is very affordable, that's a big chunk of change for a lot of people. So it's
Right. We have
difficult
been
for,
able to keep the price down.
no, you guys are really affordable. But
Yeah.
plane
Yeah.
tickets, time off of work, doesn't matter if you're free. Like there
Absolutely.
was a
The
time
hotel.
when I was 18 or between 18 and 30, probably, even if it was free, I couldn't have afforded the plane, the hotel, and you know what I mean, the time off, whatever. But what you guys are doing is you're doing these scholarships so that young people that aren't part of this demographic that can afford to do this are able to come, which I think is so generous and good of you guys to do.
I think it's so important. We did 36 this year at the conference, and we could have done 50. We had about 75 people apply, and they just write a 300 word statement, and then they submit 3 works. So we read through them, and the need is really, it gets you, but you want to also look at the work because you want to make sure that you're offering it to people that you can make the most difference with.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's a good combination of 300 word and the 3 images. And we just get wonderful letters back from them, the experience. And, Ed often talked about, if I had been 19 years old and went to an event like that, you just throw open the door of information and experience and hope too. You give these young people hope that I could go out and make a living off of this, because a lot of times when young people say, well, I want to go to art school, they're very discouraged. There's like, you won't be able to make a living. Not encouraged and supported.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, many's probably stretch, but I'd say probably at least half a dozen of my students have applied, and you guys have been generous enough to give them scholarships. And it's life-changing for them. So last year I had, how many students did I have there last year? 1, 2, I don't know if they were all on scholarship, but a few of them were. I think like 4. And now my entire atelier wants to go this coming year. They're all, because they came back and were just like giddy over the whole thing. And now my entire school wants to go because of how excited they were and how pumped up they were when they got back. So yeah, it's really a great thing that you guys offer. And correct me if I'm wrong, but it's partly, the funds for that partly come from that auction that you do.
Yes, the 6x9 mystery art sale. That was actually an idea that came from Dan Green.
Mm-hmm.
And so what we do is we ask previous winners of the competition, previous like gold medal. So, a little bit of a quality, it's an invitational thing.
Mm-hmm.
And we send them the panels, and they create a work of art that's 6x9, and they sign it on the back. And then Friday night at the conference, we attach them to these big poster boards all around the room. It's a really fun event.
Oh, it's so fun and so frustrating because I can't win.
I know. Every work I tried to get this year, I was not successful.
Yeah, same.
One year I got a Bert Silverman, and I was just over the moon. And I love that piece. And one time my son got a Mary White. And so, but you feel like you won the lottery when they call out your name.
I got to cut you off here. You are the executive director. This says a lot about, this is what I love about your organization. I mean, you're really the face of it in my mind. This is why I invited you to do this. But it's like, you could have you have this pile of 100, 200 of these things. They're all going to be $250, right? You could just take a few off the top.
Same price. Yeah.
Yeah, you could take the few off the top that you want and do the rest of them, but you don't. You actually,
I know.
You actually go through the same thing everyone else does.
We do. We stand in line, and just like everybody else.
See, that is such integrity. Seriously, because I would be so tempted to take the best ones for myself.
I'm tempted. There's no question about it. Yeah, I have been tempted, but we just, and even, even the faculty donating their time. You guys pay for your own ticket, and we don't pay you an honorarium. But that is the reason why we could keep the tuition at $500, because other organizations that do this kind of thing, you know, they charge between $1,100 and $1,300 for the weekend. But the Portrait Society is about how many people could we reach and how important our mission is. So, but you're right. We apply it all. You know, we have to stand in line like everybody else.
Yeah, that's brutal. Yeah, there were a couple I wanted last year.
Too.
I lost them. And then another thing that you do that I think is really awesome, and I always look forward to, is you have that store where you have different companies.
So we do have an exhibit
show.
hall. Yeah, and it's great. So we have about, I think there's 20 booths in there, and we have a variety of vendors from, you know, brushes to paint to, I've been working on trying to get a canvas vendor in there, and I haven't been able to do that. But because I do get that question a lot about canvas.
Well, you have panels, people who make canvas panels there.
Yes, I do. Yeah, we do have that, and they're very popular. And we've got a couple framers in there, and a variety of supplies. And so, and then we have the book and a DVD table too. So the art book table. And so, yeah, that's a really popular room. You know, Jeff, and I think it's just the same thing like what the Portrait Society is doing, is that, you know, times are changing things. And I do think that the art material supply business has changed so much. I mean, I just heard that Jack Richardson sold their company. I know Pierre with Sinlier sold to McPherson. And it's just, you know, it used to be that you wholesaled your materials to a retailer, and then that retailer sold them. And that has really changed with the internet and with the pandemic. And a lot of people that come to the conference say, our town doesn't even have an art supply store. You can't go and look at a material, feel it, try it. They just don't have it anymore. So I do think the exhibit hall is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I live in Salt Lake City, and we only have one art supply store. I mean, and it's Blick, but it's a small Blick. You know, and it's like, this is a big city.
We don't even have our Blick. Yeah, I know. We don't even have Blick anymore.
Yeah. Well, and then you get people like foreign people from out of the country, like Rosemary brushes, which is super convenient because you can just stock up while they're in the country.
Right. Yes, right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good opportunity. So, Christine, is there anything else you'd like to add about the Portrait Society before we close?
Just like to do a little shout out to all the artists that agreed to come and teach, because it does take time out of their production schedule. They do pay for their own travel. We try to help with the hotel, but you know, if they were willing to come and share their knowledge and with, you know, their fellow artists, we couldn't exist. So just, you know, I'm very appreciative of that and very aware of the dedication that it takes to prepare a program and come and give it. So,
well, that's nice of you to say, but I can't speak for all artists, but I could say for myself, I'd be really disappointed if I wasn't invited because you guys make it such a great experience. It's a blast. Like I said earlier, good. I look forward to coming every year. So thank you.
Good to hear.
Thank you for everything you do for artists. Thanks for what you do for the faculty, for what you do for artists around the country, around the world, and with your dedication to education. And we all appreciate the vision that Ed had. Of course, we all miss him. He's such a great man.
Yeah.
And it's
and I feel like I do feel like it's his legacy that he had this kernel of idea, but then we've all contributed to growing it. So I'm really proud of the Portrait Society.
As you should be. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate you being here and having this chat with me.
Well, thanks for having me.
Take care. Thanks for tuning in to the Undraped Artist Podcast. If you enjoyed it, subscribe. And if you could, leave a comment or review. That really helps the channel. Please share the show with your friends. And if you're feeling generous, consider a monthly donation at theundrapedartist.com. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next week.